We've got some very exciting news about Dragon's Dogma 2, and as we get closer to launch, I do want to talk about some of these more specific details, go over the director's comments, but also address some of the misconceptions about Dragon's Dogma 2, because quite frankly there are a ton of them, and with the game being just around the corner, I do want to talk about all of that. I also want to address some of the negative comments and criticism regarding the game, as there are quite a few changes and new features that you may not like. With that being said, hello everyone, my name is Dark Hero and let's get started. So we just got a brand new trailer for Dragon's Dogma 2 that really does a good job of emphasizing the huge scale of the game. This title is meant to be the full expression of the director's intent, where he and his team can pour their hearts and soul into this game to craft this expansive world that they tried to do with the first game. And when you take a look at some of these vistas, knowing that you'll be able to go pretty much anywhere that you see, it really puts into perspective just how massive of an open world game this is going to be, especially considering the heavy emphasis on how exploration is going to play out in Dragon's Dogma 2. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. One comment from Hideaki Itsuno, the director of Dragon's Dogma 2, goes as follows. In designing the world, our team visited real-world locations to understand the feeling of traveling to a destination within sight, while feeling excited by the path there. Our goal was to make traveling along your path fun and exciting. And from everything that I have seen about Dragon's Dogma 2, I do believe that the director's intent is being well conveyed here. And of course, I hope that translates to a fun and enjoyable gameplay experience. And it seems like the gaming community as a whole seems to be very interested in what this game is trying to do, as Dragon's Dogma 2 has reached the top 5 global sellers on Steam after the release of the character creator demo. And if you take free-to-play games out of the equation, Dragon's Dogma 2 becomes the number 2 global seller on Steam for all of their paid games, which is absolutely absurd, especially considering that the game hasn't even released. There is a ton of hype for this game, and given how it is going against the tradition of so many AAA games, especially open world games, where I feel like most of the gaming community as a whole has grown tired of some of these tropes, having all of these quest markers spread around the world, telling you everything that you need and don't even need to know at all times, going up a tower to reveal all the hidden secrets of the map, only to then have you repeat that same process 20 times, and then most of the things that you end up finding in that open world aren't even that special or meaningful. And I mean, we just had the recent example of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which does have that same tired open world trope. So when you have a game that goes against that grain, doesn't quite hold your hand and lets your imagination run free, offering these really cool class fantasies, with each of the different vocations feeling so different, it's no wonder that Dragon's Dogma 2 is such a hyped game. Now this leads me of course to those misconceptions that I do want to talk about and address here, because I have seen a lot of people saying that Dragon's Dogma 2 is not going to have any quest markers, that the game is not going to have fast travel or anything like that. And there's even some people that still believe the game is going to have more than 10 vocations, which it is not, it has been confirmed, so let's go into all of that. First and foremost, Dragon's Dogma 2 is going to have fast travel. Now it is not going to be the most basic fast travel that you see in most open world games where you just open up your map and you can go to any spot of importance that you choose. In this game, it's going to work pretty much the same as in Dragon's Dogma 1, where you can use a fairy stone, a consumable item that you can find in the open world, and then you can teleport to a port crystal. Which are these crystals that you are going to find? They may be located in towns or in some remote place, but those are going to be the only places that you'll be able to fast travel to. Additionally, you are going to be able to ride an ox cart. You can go up to a merchant, pay the fee, and ride on the ox cart, and then you may choose to leisurely enjoy your journey to your destination, or you will have the option to simply go to sleep, and by the time you wake up, you are essentially arriving at your destination. Though keep in mind that an ox cart can be ambushed at any moment, at which point you'll have to leave the ox cart, fight off a pack of goblins, monsters, bandits, whatever it may be, and if by the end the ox cart is not destroyed, you'll be able to resume your journey. But that is pretty much how travel is going to work in Dragon's Dogma 2, which I think some people were exaggerating a little bit by saying that there is no fast travel. Now as for the quest markers, Dragon's Dogma 2 is going to have quest markers much in the same way that Dragon's Dogma 1 has, where you can set one of these quests as your active and you'll get a marker on your map telling you where to go. That being said, the game is not going to tell you exactly where, so for example, if you have a quest where you need to go to a cave and exterminate a group of goblins, the game will indicate where it is. That being said, if for example you need to find a specific NPC in town, the game is not outright going to tell you where they are, and in those instances you will need to pay attention to what the NPCs tell you, because they will be giving you hints and specific directions to reach your goal. But then of course you have the option to go with a pawn that has already completed that quest, and you'll be able to simply follow that pawn to be able to reach your destination very easily. So again, it's not like the game is not going to give you any sort of direction. There are going to be quest markers, there is going to be some hand holding, but it's all going to be very limited, so that you can immerse yourself in the world and actually feel like the Arisen, where you need to engage with the characters of this world and you need to respect its rules and its nature. And that leads me to the next point, the next misconception that people have, which is that Dragon's Dogma 2 is going to feature more than 10 vocations. That has already been confirmed by multiple sources, including the director himself. Dragon's Dogma 2 is going to launch with 10 vocations. You're going to have 4 starter vocations, 2 advanced vocations, 3 hybrid vocations, and then there's the unique one, which is the Warfarer, which I suppose could also be considered a hybrid vocation. And a lot of Dragon's Dogma 1 players are actually upset at the number of vocations that we're getting with this game for multiple reasons. Now, before I go into these reasons, I do want to say that a lot of people have been saying that players are entitled for complaining about this. But I would argue that there is a somewhat valid reason as to why these players are somewhat disappointed by the number of vocations we're getting. Given the system that we have in Dragon's Dogma 1, where you have 3 starter vocations, and all 3 of those starter vocations have advanced vocations, those being the Ranger, the Sorcerer, and the Warrior, and then you have the hybrid vocations, the Assassin, the Mystic Knight, and the Magic Archer, it all fits in very nicely and it all works together to create this concise experience. However, in Dragon's Dogma 2, it kind of feels weird to not have the advanced version of the Thief and the Archer, so you only end up having 2 advanced vocations despite having 4 starter vocations, which makes the entire vocation system feel a little bit incomplete, at least on paper. We then have the 4 hybrid vocations, those being the Magic Archer, Mystic Spearhand, the Trickster, and the Warfarer. But it's weird that there is no hybrid vocation that uses the Thief, and given the game's color system with the vocations, the Trickster's colors end up feeling somewhat arbitrary, and then of course the Warfarer is meant to be a mix of all of the different vocations. Additionally, a lot of players have been complaining about Dragon's 2's vocations in the fact that some of them are going to be much more simplified. After all, you're only going to be able to equip 4 different skills on all the different vocations, whereas before you would be able to have 2 different sets of skills for each different vocation, with the exception of the Warrior, which was the only vocation that was able to equip only 3 skills, but all the other vocations were capable of equipping 6. But here in Dragon's Dogma 2, you're only going to be able to equip 4, and where you would previously have the second set of skills, you're going to have the vocation-specific mechanic instead, which in the case of the Fighter, it's going to be the shield that you can block and parry. For the Thief, it's going to be this dodge that is also a dash that deals damage. For the Warrior, it's going to be a shoulder tackle that you can combo into your different attacks, so on and so forth. So while you do end up getting this extra unique mechanic with your vocation, a lot of players dislike the fact that you'll be able to equip less skills in Dragon's Dogma 2. I do believe that this is going to be intentional, so that if you take a skill slot to, let's say, equip Halidom on your mage to be able to heal your party, you'll be limiting their offensive options a lot more. Therefore, you'll need to be much more conscious about the choices that you make. Ultimately, we'll need to wait for the game's full release to truly see if the vocations are going to have less or more complexity than they had in Dragon's Dogma 1. And then of course there is the complaint of the armor system in Dragon's Dogma 2 being much more simple, as we are essentially getting 2 less equipment slots for our character. I previously covered the justification that was given by the game's director. Personally, I don't buy the reason that they gave us, and I think it's a choice that is quite simply going to limit the number of options that we're going to have. And then of course, the next complaint that I'm seeing a lot regarding Dragon's Dogma 2 is, to no one's surprise, the game's performance. With all of the gameplay previews that we have seen being captured on the PS5, they were running at 30 frames, although the game would occasionally dip below the 30 frames. And so a lot of players are worried about the game's performance and how it is going to be once the game fully releases, which is totally understandable, and it is a very big concern. Personally, I'm someone that doesn't mind playing at 30 FPS, but I recently built a high-end PC with the sole intent of being able to play these games with the highest resolution and performance possible. And even though the gameplay previews that we have seen, Capcom has always stated that they were playing on very old versions of the game, but at this point I would not expect the game to have the best performance at launch. If you're playing on console, I would expect the game to run at 30 FPS, but because they're not even going to offer a performance mode, I would honestly not expect much beyond that. And as for PC players, I expect the game to run at 60 FPS when you're just exploring the world and there's not a lot happening on screen. But I imagine that in some of the bigger combat scenarios, when you're facing off against a dragon and a cyclops at the same time, or whenever you're exploring some of the massive towns that we have seen, I can totally see the game chugging in those occasions, so I would not be surprised if we end up getting a day 1 patch and if the game's performance isn't quite ideal. I do also want to mention that some of Capcom's previous releases also didn't have the best performance at launch. The first example that comes to mind is Monster Hunter World, where the game launched with some not so great optimization on PC, and even before then I believe that they ended up patching the PS4 version when it released, because it was also undergoing some performance problems. So as hyped as I am for Dragon's Dogma 2, having spent so much time in the first game across the PC, Switch and PS4, I feel like I'm going to end up loving the game regardless, but I genuinely believe the game is not going to have the best optimization at launch. So of course the best thing for you to do as a consumer is to wait for the reviews, and then you decide for yourself how you're going to go about it. Of course, if you're on PC, you're going to be able to download mods, and we're likely going to be getting a lot of performance mods, and funnily enough, there are already quite a few mods for Dragon's Dogma 2, and the game's not even out. These mods are just for the character creator, and that's pretty crazy to me. So given how popular the game is going to be, you can expect to see a ton of mods. And of course I'll be sure to cover them here on the channel. So if you are interested in more Dragon's Dogma 2 guides, news and everything in between, please subscribe to the channel for more. With that being said, my name is Dark Hero, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, happy hunting!